Alrighty, hello everybody. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to complete the Caribbean assignment. So in your Google Classroom, you're going to see three attachments to the Caribbean assignment page or assessment. So what you're going to see is the first thing is the article for the Caribbean reading. It says Caribbean Geography. So there's an article there. The second thing is there'll be this video. So this video, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read through the article and highlight some important details again for people that want to listen along to the article. And then the third thing is going to be a Google form that you need to complete that has 10 questions from this article. Alrighty. So you'll see three things in the Google Classroom assignment selection for the Caribbean reading questions. So you'll see the article itself. Then you'll see the video, this video of me reading through the article, and then you'll have the Google Forms attachment that you need to complete after reading the article. Alrighty, so I'm going to share my screen, and then we'll get started reading the article real quickly. So what we're going to look at first is we want to look at where the Caribbean is located. So if we're looking at this map here, this map kind of shows us exactly where the Caribbean is located in the world. So we're in between, we have the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean Sea, and then the Gulf of Mexico is up here at the top left corner, okay? And then you have Florida, so the United States is up at the top of our map. The United States and Florida is at the top of our map. You have Central America over here on the left side of our map, and then South America with Colombia and Venezuela is down here at the very bottom. So the Caribbean, all the countries in the Caribbean are these island countries that are in between North America and South America. So all these island countries you see in the middle of the page that are in between the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean make up the Caribbean countries. So we're going to read through just a little about what these islands have in common, and then some interesting facts about each one. All righty, so let's go to our article. So our article is titled Caribbean, Our Island Neighbors. So let's read, like in the other video, I'm just going to read through paragraph by paragraph and then highlight some important details that'll be useful for you to answer the Google Forms quiz at the very end. Okay, so the first paragraph, it says, there are 13 independent countries in the Caribbean. Some of these countries are a single island, while other countries consist of several islands. Some of the islands belong to other nations, including the United Kingdom, France, Netherlands, and the United States. So the first big thing I highlighted is there are 13 independent countries in the Caribbean. So of all these islands, there are 13 countries within the Caribbean region. Some of them just have one single island, while other countries consist of many different islands. So they have many different islands that make up the one big country. Another important thing is at the very bottom, it says that some of these countries are owned by other countries, or some of these islands are owned by other countries around the world. So you have the United Kingdom, France, Netherlands, and the United States, which own some of those islands and nations. So the next paragraph, land and water. The islands of the Caribbean Sea are divided into three main groups: the Bahamas, the Greater Antilles, and the Lesser Antilles. The Bahamas is a group of over 700 islands. People inhabit only about 30 of the Bahamian islands. South of the Bahamas are the largest islands of the Caribbean, called the Greater Antilles. The Greater Antilles include the large islands of Cuba, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and Hispaniola. The rest of the Caribbean islands form an arc that stretches from Puerto Rico to the coast of South America. This group of smaller islands is known as the Lesser Antilles. So a big thing we want to look at here is the islands of the Caribbean. So in the Caribbean, they are divided into three main groups, all the islands. So you have the Bahamas, the Greater Antilles, and the Lesser Antilles. So these are the three big groups of islands. Alrighty. So the Bahamas has over 700 islands, and then only about 30 islands of those 700 islands are inhabited by people. And then, let's see here, the Greater Antilles includes our bigger islands of Cuba, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and Hispaniola. Alrighty, let's go to the next paragraph. So it says the islands of the Caribbean are very different. Some of the islands are mountainous, others are flat as pancakes. Some are covered in tropical rainforest, others are dry desert. Some begin as coral reefs, while others begin as undersea volcanoes. Cuba, the largest island, is more than 500 miles across. Some of the other islands are less than 1 mile across. So all these islands in the Caribbean are very different. Each one is very different. And you can see each one has different landforms no matter what island you look at. So like it goes through, others are flat, some are mountainous, some are dry as a desert, some are rainforest atmosphere. And then it talks about Cuba is the largest island that is more than 500 miles across, so it's very big. And then some of the islands are not even a mile across. So even the size of the islands varies from island to island. All right, let's go to the picture here. So in the picture, it shows us the islands of the Caribbean are a part of an archipelago, a chain of islands, which separates the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. The archipelago is made up of more than 7,000 islands. So a big term we want to look at is archipelago, which means a chain of islands. So all these chains of islands in the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, they kind of separate between the sea and the Atlantic Ocean. All right, let's go back to our reading. So it says the highest mountain range in the Caribbean, the Cordillera Central, stretches all the way from Cuba through the island of Hispaniola to Puerto Rico. Most of the mountain range is underwater. Many of the islands in the Caribbean are actually the tops of the Cordillera Central, reaching above ocean water. These islands all have mountains in the middle. Some of these mountains are volcanoes, and the beaches have black sand from the volcanoes. The tallest mountain in the Caribbean is Pico Dorate in the Dominican Republic. Pico Dorate is 10,164 feet high. Alrighty, so let's look at this little picture here to the side. So it says a statue of Juan Pablo Duarte sits at the top of Pico Dorate. In the Dominican Republic, Dorate is known as the father of the country, similar to George Washington in the United States. So one of the islands is called the Dominican Republic, and this person named Juan Pablo Duarte is one of the founders of the Dominican Republic, and he's considered to be basically their George Washington, one of the founders of the country. All right, so let's go to the next paragraph. So it says tropical rainforests are found on many of the Caribbean islands. The largest rainforests are on Dominica, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. Each year, more than 100 billion gallons of rainfall on Puerto Rico's El Yunque rainforest. It rains about 4 times a day. The rainforests contain many plants and animals found in few other places in the world, such as the coqui, a tiny tree frog often no bigger than an inch. So most of our islands in the Caribbean are these tropical rainforests. So they make up on the islands of Dominica, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. And each year they have almost 100 billion gallons of rainfall in this one rainforest called El Yunque. And it sometimes even rains 4 times a day. So just imagine all that rainfall falling in this area. And over here, we'll take a look at the picture of the coqui. So over on the right side of the page, we have the coqui is the mascot of Puerto Rico. This tiny frog has a high-pitched sound that can be heard from miles away. So even though it's no bigger than an inch, it has this very high-pitched sound that can be heard from miles away. Let's go back to the reading. It says the Caribbean has many coral reefs covering 20,000 square miles. Reefs circle many of the smaller islands, including Aruba, Bonaire, Antigua, and the Cayman Islands. One of the largest coral reefs in the world is in the Bahamas. Although coral looks like it's made of rock, it is actually a colony of millions of tiny animals called polyps that feed by filtering plankton from the water. The coral polyps attach to rocks and other solid underwater formations such as shipwrecks. Hard shells protect coral polyps, and it is these shells that give a reef a stony appearance. So the Caribbean has many coral reefs covering almost 20,000 square miles. So these coral reefs take up a lot of the area around the sea to help these wildlife live in a certain area. And these coral polyps kind of form the landforms in the coral reef, and they attach to rocks and other solid underwater formations such as shipwrecks, and that kind of creates that stone-like feature. So let's look at the picture again on the right side. So it says coral reefs create a habitat for entire ocean ecosystem. The nooks and crannies of coral reefs shelter sea urchins, crabs, and other invertebrates. Many species of fish graze on algae. Eels roam coral tunnels, and predators such as barracudas and tiger sharks swing through the reefs in search of prey. So a very big underwater ocean ecosystem lives within these coral reefs, attracting many different types of animals. So let's go back to read. While the beaches on the volcanic islands have black sand, the beaches on the coral islands have white or pink sand. The white sand is formed by green parrotfish. So let's highlight that. The white sand is formed by green parrotfish. Parrotfish feed on the algae that live inside the coral polyps. To get to the algae, the parrotfish must scrape at the live coral with its parrot-like beak and swallow pieces of hard coral skeleton. As the hard coral passes through parrotfish, it is crushed into small pieces by additional grinding teeth in its fish's throat. Eventually, the coral is exerted by the parrotfish as small grains of white sand. One parrotfish can produce a ton of soft white sand each year. Pink sand is formed by tiny red organisms that grow on coral reefs. These organisms fall to the ocean floor when they die, and their red shells are broken up by the surf into fine, soft pink colored sand. So that's how you can get different colored sand at the bottom of our ocean. So you have the white sand, black sand, and pink sand. So in the picture over here, it says parrotfish are named for their bright feather-like colors and their powerful beaks formed from fused jaw teeth. So if you look, you can see their sharp jaws here that kind of give them a little beak that are able to break down those materials into sand. All right, the next paragraph. So the Caribbean Sea itself is one of the largest saltwater seas on the planet. Its deepest point is the Cayman Trough between the Cayman Islands and Jamaica at 25,220 feet below sea level. The trough contains the world's deepest chain of undersea volcanoes. So the big thing here, the Caribbean Sea itself is one of the largest saltwater seas on the planet. So it's one of the bigger saltwater seas. And throughout the Caribbean Sea, you have these wide, big troughs that contain these undersea volcanoes. There's a bunch of undersea volcanoes throughout the Caribbean Sea. All right, so let's talk about the climate now. So the islands of the Caribbean enjoy a warm tropical climate, which means that the weather is usually hot and damp. The temperature doesn't change much between the hottest and coolest months. The temperature is usually around 82 degrees in July and around 75 degrees in January. So instead of a winter and summer season, the Caribbean has a dry season from November to April and a hotter wet season from May to October. Almost all the rain for the year falls in the wet season. So the climate in the Caribbean, they enjoy a warm tropical climate. So they have very hot and damp weather. And so the temperature doesn't change very much throughout the entire year. So goes from like 85 degrees or 82 degrees in July to around 75 degrees in January. So it doesn't change at all, pretty much. And they have these wet seasons. So these wet seasons from May to October is when most of the rainfall occurs, and then the dry season from November to April is when little to no rainfall falls. And next paragraph. So tropical storms and hurricanes are a danger in the Caribbean. Storms frequently hit the coast between June and October. Hurricanes are huge storms up to 600 miles across with the strong winds of 75 to 200 miles per hour. Dangerous winds can extend 200 miles out from the center of the hurricane. Each hurricane usually lasts for over a week. moving 10 to 20 miles per hour over the open ocean. Hurricanes rotate in a counterclockwise direction around the center of the storm, or eye. The eye is the calmest part with only light winds. When hurricanes come onto land, the heavy rain, strong winds, and large waves can cause a lot of damage to property and can be very dangerous to people and animals. So tropical storms and hurricanes are the biggest danger, or one of the biggest dangers in the Caribbean, just because they're small islands, there's nowhere, so that it's hard for them to find cover from these hurricanes that can just float right over these islands because they can stretch up to 600 miles across, and they bring these strong winds of 75 to 200 miles, which cause lots of damage, and they move very slowly. So some of them only move about 10 to 20 miles per hour over open ocean, and there's a lot of water around these islands in the Caribbean, which causes the hurricane just to kind of sail over, and the storm lasts for a long time. So let's go down to the bottom paragraph here. There are at least 19 active, likely to erupt again, volcanoes in the Caribbean. While Montserrat's Soufriere Hills volcano is the only one in the region that is currently erupting, the volcano known to have erupted most frequently this century is Kikumjeni, an undersea volcano north of Grenada. Kikumjeni is known to have erupted at least 11 times since it was first identified in 1939. All right, so the big thing here, there are 19 active volcanoes in the Caribbean, and so it says while Montserrat's Soufriere Hills volcano is the only one in the region that is currently erupting, another one erupts more frequently. So Kikumjeni is the other name for the volcano that is an underwater volcano that has erupted 11 times since it's been identified. So let's look at the picture up here. So you can see the picture right here kind of shows Soufriere volcano erupting. So it says Soufriere Hills volcano became active in 1995 and has continued to erupt ever since. Its eruptions have made more than half of the island of Montserrat uninhabitable and destroyed the capital city. About 2/3 of the population has left the island. So before this volcano started erupting, people lived on this island, and since it's constantly erupting, people have left the island because it's unsafe to live there. And this volcano even destroyed its capital city, which caused a lot of people to leave the island as well. Let's scroll down here to products and natural resources. So because of their small size, the Caribbean islands do not have many natural resources. The most important natural resource is the beautiful beaches. The beaches attract millions of tourists every year, and many of the Caribbean people have jobs related to tourism. So one of the most talked about things in the Caribbean is their beautiful beaches, and that brings a lot of people to this area, which has caused the Caribbean people, so people that live in the Caribbean, to have jobs that are related to tourism because so many people come to this region to visit these beaches. So the Caribbean has many forms of wildlife. The waters are home to manatees, porpoises, sharks, and sea turtles. Over 500 different kinds of fish live in the coral reefs. The islands are home to snakes, iguanas, parrots, flamingos, and bats. Cuba is home to the world's smallest bird, the zunzuncito, a bee hummingbird. It weighs less than 1 ounce and is as small as a grasshopper. So throughout the Caribbean, you have these many forms of wildlife, both on the land and in the water. So in the water, you have like manatees, porpoises, sharks, and sea turtles. And then on land, you have things that include snakes, iguanas, parrots, flamingos, and bats. And then it talked about the world's smallest bird, the zunzuncito, which is located in Cuba. And it is small. It weighs almost 1 ounce and is as small as a grasshopper. So think a little grasshopper out in your yard. That's how small this bird is. So let's look at 3 different resources that are throughout the Caribbean. So the first one, it says, while tourism is the most important business on other Caribbean islands, agriculture is the most important business in Grenada. Grenada is extremely fertile. The locals say drop a seed anywhere and it'll grow. The center of the island is a jungle of flowering plants, including orchids, oleander, and hibiscus. Grenada is called the Spice Island because it produces more spices than any other place on Earth. Grenada produces many spices, including cloves, ginger, and nutmeg for cooking. So Grenada is known as the Spice Island. So Grenada is called the Spice Island just because it's a place where a lot of growth can happen. So the quote there, it says, drop a seed anywhere and it'll grow. So the soil there is so welcoming to plant growth that you can almost plant anything and it'll grow. So they grow a lot of spices and different plants to help with their food, and they sell that throughout the entire world. So let's take a look at the little picture there. It kind of shows some different spices and some different plants that they grow. All righty, so in the middle there there are farms on many other islands too. They grow coffee, cocoa beans, and sugarcane. Other farms produce tobacco and indigo, a plant used to make blue dye. Plantains, pineapples, coconuts, and tomatoes, bananas, peppers, pumpkins, guava, avocado, and yams are also grown on many of the islands. Many people in the Caribbean have banana trees in their backyards. Plantains look just like bananas, but are larger and thicker and have a different flavor. So the Caribbean islands grow many, many different types of fruits as well and vegetables. So you have plantains, pineapples, coconuts, tomatoes, bananas, peppers, pumpkins, guava, avocado, yams are all well-known types of fruits and vegetables that are grown on all the islands, or most of the islands throughout the Caribbean. So there are some of the examples of what they grow. And then lastly, let's take a look over here. It says some of the islands have factories that produce medicines, chemicals, electronics, clothing, and food products. Some gold, silver, and bauxite used to make aluminum are mined in the Caribbean. The Dominican Republic is one of the world's most important sources of amber, a fossilized tree resin, which is very popular for jewelry. So other than the plants and the spices and the fruits and vegetables that they grow, they also grow different types of medicine. They also have different factories that use these to produce medicine, chemicals, and clothing, electronics, and food products. So all these are made in the Caribbean. And then they can make things such as jewelry and bauxite, which is used to make aluminum. So let's get on to our last page here, landmarks. So tourists from all over the world come to the Caribbean to relax on the beaches and enjoy the sun. Many tourists come to the Caribbean on cruise ships. Some visitors like to take a cruise so they can visit many islands in one trip. A trip that takes in a lot of different islands is often called island hopping. So a big thing to do in the Caribbean is take a cruise throughout the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, and then that way you can visit as many islands as possible, and that is called island hopping. And then that middle paragraph there, it says, the Caribbean is a great place for water sports, from windsurfing to sailing. Tourists swim, snorkel, and scuba dive along the coral reefs. The clear, shallow waters along the coral reefs are superb places for fishing, and fishermen come from all over the world to try their luck to catch snailfish, marlin, and bonefish. So you have a lot of water sports, windsurfing and sailing, and then also it's a good place for fishing. So a lot of people come for those aspects as well for the Caribbean. And then a little pop culture. So you might be surprised to learn a great deal of Hollywood's top movies are shot, at least in part, in the Caribbean. Marriott Bay on St. Lucia is a popular site for movie makers, including the setting for the movie Dr. Dolittle. Dominica was chosen as a primary set for all three of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. So it's a big place for Hollywood's movies to be shot there. And then some famous movies that were shot throughout the Caribbean are Dr. Dolittle and then, of course, Pirates of the Caribbean. And then let's take a look at our last four interesting facts. So the first one on the far left side. So Rio Camuy Cave Park in Puerto Rico is one of the largest cave systems in the world. It is a popular place for cave explorers. This park has more than 200 caves. Some of the caves are hundreds of feet deep. The caves were carved out by an underground river. The caves are home to more than 13 species of bats and hundreds of other spider, frog, and insect species. The caves are also home to a unique species of fish that is totally blind. So in this cave park in Puerto Rico, a lot of cave explorers come to visit because this cave has been dug out by an underground river. And then you can find many different things in this cave. So a lot of different species of animals such as bat, spiders, and frog and insect species. I don't know if I wanted to go to this place. I'm not a big spider fan, so I don't know if I could hang out. But you could also find blind fish. So since there's very little light in these caves, these fish have adapted to be blind since they don't really need their sight because they can't see in the dark water. All right, let's go to the middle one there. So let's look at here. So it says Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico has the world's largest and most powerful radio telescope. It is used to listen deep into space and to study distant parts of the solar system. Arecibo's radio telescope uses a huge bowl 1,000 feet across to catch radio waves. Scientists at Arecibo use the telescope to study planets, comets, and asteroids. So in this Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, it has the world's largest and most powerful telescope. This is where we get a lot of our images from deep into space. So scientists use the Arecibo Observatory to study planets, comets, and asteroids. This is one of the telescopes that we use to know so much about our space. All right, the next one there. So Faro a Colón, Columbus Lighthouse in Dominica is a huge building in the shape of a cross. It sends 157 beams of light into the sky to form a large cross of light that can be seen from as far away as Puerto Rico. Dominicans claim the lighthouse contains Christopher Columbus's remains. They built a shrine to house his tomb, and guards stand around it all day. Spaniards argue that Columbus is actually buried in Spain. So obviously Christopher Columbus, our famous explorer from Spain, came over and discovered the Americas. They claim that his body is in this lighthouse observatory area thing that the Puerto Ricans or Dominican Republic claim that his body is there, but also it's disputed that Spain also has his actual body is buried in Spain. So that's just kind of a cool little site to look at in Dominican Republic. And then our last little information. So there's the little building there. And then our last information, it says Boiling Lake is a flooded fumarole, a crack in the earth that allows hot gases to vent from the molten lava below. The boiling waters are heated by molten lava just below the Earth's surface. The eerie-looking lake sits inside a deep basin, its centers emitting bubbly bursts. There is no road leading to the boiling lake. People who want to visit this spectacular place have to hike about 3 hours in each direction, about 7 miles round trip. So this boiling lake, right here, this picture kind of just shows where these hot gases are coming up from inside the earth, where lava is just kind of sitting there and it's releasing onto the earth. And this lake is very hot. It's just kind of an escape for these gases. And in order to view this, you have to travel by hiking there because there's no roads there. So you have to hike 3 miles in each direction, or 3 hours in each direction, in order to see this big lake, the boiling lake. Alrighty, so that's all of our information for the Caribbean. Big thing is you want to make sure you go back through this video and just take a look at the highlighted portions, and they'll help you with answering the questions for the Google Forms. Alrighty, so make sure, again, you take your time reading through the articles, take your time reading through the questions, and then submit it only when you think you are 100% sure on your answers. Okay, so take your time going back through the questions again on the Google Forms. There's only 10 this time, so take your time reading them. If you have any questions, make sure you're reaching out and asking. Okay, we'll see you guys later.